For me, the key to success is effort. Prior to a trip, I will do all my homework, research the venue and pick the brains of anglers who have fished the lake. I use the best rods, the best reels and the best terminal tackle that I can afford. My rigs are tested so that I have 100% confidence that if fish are feeding, I stand a good chance of converting a pickup into a fish on the bank. I also use the best bait that I can afford, and that boosts my confidence. Having all of this done prior to the trip means that when I arrive I can clear my head of all the noise and concentrate on what I believe is the single biggest contribution to success: watching the water. Every morning I set my alarm for an hour before first light so that I could sit, wait and watch for the smallest telltale of where the fish were. If you see one, I can guarantee you there are at least another 4 to 5 fish with it that you can't see. All of my best or most captures of fish, for as long as I can remember, have come off the back of observation. The smallest show can tell you all you need to know. The more they show, bubble, leap or shoulder, the more you can piece together the jigsaw of carping. Most of the fish had been shown at the top end of the lake in the shallows to my right. On Wednesday morning, a couple of fish began to show on the pads, especially at first light, and then mid-morning a big, very big fish crashed out right in the spot where it had been baited up. So as quick as you like, I put out a bait boat with a couple of double wafters on the hook and waited to see what would happen. So it's Wednesday and we arrived on Saturday, picked our swims, got ourselves organised, and we've been fishing, and to say conditions have been terrible is an understatement. But they're beginning to come a bit better now. We've had a morning of heavy rain, the wind's changed, the wind's actually got up. The last couple of days have been flat calm. But I've finally managed to get Simon Mansbridge here on the lake. He's the guy who owns the lake, himself and his good wife Karina, and so we're going to just have a quick chit chat about Serrières, because let's face it, Serrières is one of those well-known famous fisheries and has been visited by a lot of the top anglers in the UK and abroad. A lot of Dutch and Germans come here, isn't that right, Si?
That's right, yep.
So just go through the history of the place for us, will you?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, welcome to Lac Serrières and Badger's Holt. It's good to have you here. You're absolutely right, the conditions really couldn't have been much worse. The last 2 weeks, very high pressure, complete calm conditions, no wind at all, and the fish really not showing too much and not particularly active, but it has just changed and you have already had half a dozen fish, so under the conditions we've got, pretty good going. Yeah, history of the place, well, the whole complex here opened around about 2003. It was established by a guy called Bob Davis, that's probably most people are aware of, quite a famous carp angler. Yeah. We have the two lakes here, Lac Serrières and Badger's Holt. Both lakes needed a certain amount of work doing to them in the early days. They didn't really have a stock of carp. There were a few originals. Most of those were small, like wildies. They got taken out. And from 2003 to maybe 2005 or 6, Bob stocked in a number of obviously very good strain fish, a lot of French royals, I believe some Czech royals as well. And those fish have just thrived. It's been an unbelievable kind of success story for the condition and the weight gains of the fish. We took over the place. We bought the place from Bob in 2013, Karina and myself, and it was already established as a big fish water, but we're trying, and we're already on the way to turning it into essentially a kind of hardcore, far from a runs water. It's a big fish water. We've got more and more big fish coming through, and we're trying to appeal to the kind of hardcore, old school thinking, very serious carp angler. It's not place to come unless you have quite a bit of experience.
I should get my coat then, shouldn't I? So, what sort of stock are we looking at here?
Well, we've got about 80 carp in Badger's Holt, a lot of really big fish in that lake. It's only about 2.7 acres.
Yeah, it's tiny, isn't it?
It's very small. It's about 80 carp in it. The average weight in that lake is mid to upper 40. It's around about 46, 47 pounds at the moment, which is incredible for such a small lake. There's a lot of 50s in the lake, certainly in excess of, 23 different ones at last winter when we went through the photos, but this year we've had some new ones. So, maybe 25 or so different 50-pound plus fish, with the biggest fish being quite a famous mirror that's been written about a lot in many magazines, many articles, and that's a fish called Jojo. That fish was 72 pounds when we bought the complex, and it had been that weight for a while. We've made some changes with the bait policies here, and we do a lot of feeding in the winter and so on, and we're now at 76 pounds with that fish. It's been out 3 times around that weight this year, 2 times at 76 and 1 at 76.5, so we know it's a consistent weight and it was correctly weighed and so on. We've got a lot of fish coming up as well behind that fish in Badger's Holt. We've got a lot of fish in the 55 to sort of 59 bracket. We've had a new 60 out just recently. We've got at least one, if not possibly 2 60-pound commons in there. One comes out quite regularly. The other one hasn't been out for a while, so I'm not sure, but it's possibly 2 60-pound commons as well. Syrier is completely different. Syrier is much bigger. It's about 20 acres, about 18 acres of fishable water. We have about 350, maybe a little bit more actually, carp in Lake Syrier. It's a different situation. We have everything in Syrier from doubles, as you found out this week.
Doubles queen, yeah.
Yeah, we have doubles all the way through to fish to just over 80 pounds this year. We did our first 80 on the complex in April this year. We've got 2 fish around that weight, 2 fish capable, and I think April in 2016 they'll both be over 80 pounds. One definitely, the other one 78 to 80, 81, something like that. We've got also a number of fish behind that. We've got probably 4 other fish behind those 2 above 60 pounds. Again, all putting weight on, so it's really interesting and exciting for the future. I've always been a big fish angler myself, and that's what we're really aiming for here.
Yeah, I think you've achieved it. I mean, we have been watching the water a lot. There's not been that many shows, but every now and again one of the big girls pops her head out, and they are fairly, big units, aren't they?
Substantial fish, yeah.
Substantial fish. So, look, I've fished abroad on many lakes. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the complex itself. I have to be honest with you, this is probably one of the nicest commercial style fisheries I've fished in France, hands down. When I got here, it was quite interesting. Simon picked up that, it had been a slow week last week, and the runs had come around tea time, around 4 in the afternoon, and that's actually dinner time. So if you avail of the food package, which we have done, and I have to say the food package, hands down, I know the breakfast roll is your little niche, but your wife she's cooking up a storm in the kitchen for the dinners. They're incredible. But the great thing about here was, when I arrived, as Simon had said, look, dinner time will be 4 o'clock. He did mention that runs were coming around that time, and it was offered to me that they could bring round my dinner on a tray, and I've actually not left my swim every night because that's the time I've been catching my fish, and that's a great service, number one. But just talking about the complex, when you get in here, it really is, everything is catered for the angler. Everything is set up just so. The swims are really big, really comfortable, very well thought out. We're fishing a lot of open water here in this particular swim, and it's quite a silty lake. There's not really many features to go at, is there, Simon?
No, the whole lake is very silty. It's well over 300 years old. So over the years, obviously, these lakes in France, there's many of them that are quite similar. They do silt up, and in fact that's the reason they're so good at producing big fish, because although the bait is key, these fish are not big just on bait. There's natural food, absolutely prolific amounts of natural food in that silt. It's very good silt, not the smelly black stuff you get in some lakes. It's the really rich stuff that's full of food. But over the years, what tends to happen, if you had no fish in the lake at all, the lake would just be completely flat, and it would be kind of very shallow where the feeder river comes in, and obviously progressively deep to the dam end. They're all pretty similar. The only thing you've really got to go out there is the fish do create their own. We get certain areas where there'll be a lot of, for example, bloodworm activity for a few weeks, and the fish dig them up like hell in the silt. They literally dig, I mean, up to their gills in silt. And if you go out and look at those areas, particularly after a hatch, after that's happened for a while, you find there's kind of craters out there. They're not massively different to the surrounding areas, but if you can imagine the lake's kind of pitted with those all over it, it's a question of finding the ones that are active at any one time. The old ones are obviously devoid of food and therefore usually fish as well. So there are features, but they're very subtle and they're only created by the carp, and they're moving all the time as well. It's not like a gravel pit where you've got bars and plateaus and gullies and things to target that are always in the same place. These things are kind of moving around. But yeah, it's quite featureless. It is silt fishing. The silt worries some people.
Yeah,
but it shouldn't.
No. Look, silt fishing is silt fishing. You've got to get used to that if you're a carper. But one thing I will say is, you'd be forgiven for thinking, because you're in open water and you're fishing in silt, there's not really any snags out there, that you can kind of lighten up on your tactics, and you can't really, because all around the edges are dense beds of lilies. And I know over in the corner you were saying that there's a lot of sunken trees and that in that particular corner. These fish, when they're hooked, they make a beeline for them, don't they? They know exactly where they are.
Yeah, absolutely right. The lake has many hazardous areas, lily beds, sunken trees, bushes that are hanging into the water, and various other features that the fish can go into. They know where they are, they go straight for them if you're anywhere near them when you hook them. That being said, we've done a ton of work in the last couple of years since we've been here. We've reduced the lilies down quite a lot to make things a bit safer, easier for the anglers to get the fish out and safer for the fish themselves. It also tends to make the fishing better, because when we bought the lake, the lilies were much more than they are now, and the fish were holding up in them so much that there were parts of the lake where if you weren't able to fish lilies, you were just away from the fish all the time. So by reducing them, we've made things a bit safer for the fish, easier for the anglers to catch them a little bit, and spread the fish out around the lake a bit. But you're absolutely right, the features are quite brutal in places. For example, the lily roots can be literally thicker than your arm, and they kind of hoop up off the bottom, so if you had to design a perfect snag, that's what you would probably design. That's the reason, as you mentioned, you look out there, it doesn't look too bad. You hook a fish and you soon find out it can be quite bad.
Yeah.
And that's why we really are quite keen on people using very strong tackle, and we have a certain amount of rules that we put in place simply to protect the stock of fish.
So briefly, just run through the rules. Line breaking strain is a minimum of
15 pounds, which is about 0.35 millimeters.
But you would prefer more 0.40.
Yeah,
if you could get away with
we would, in a way, we would like to make the rule, something like 18 pound or 20 pound even, and 0.40. We don't want to make it too restrictive to anglers. We also understand that you don't want to come to a lake where you're told every single thing you have to do, and you feel you haven't got any flexibility. So first of all, it's the number one thing is be sensible. And with the line, thicker is generally better. The thing is, you can use bait boats, you can use the rowing boats here. You haven't got to cast, really. If you want to cast, fantastic, but you don't have to. So thick line isn't a disadvantage, it's just an advantage. To me, it's a no-brainer. I would use really thick, heavy line if I came here, if I was paying to come here.
Yeah. And then no leader materials whatsoever.
No leaders. The reason for that, we have had a number of tethered fish since we've been here, and the weak point when you have a leader is the knot between the main line and the leader. And usually leaders are really strong by their nature. Hook length materials are usually pretty strong as well. So it's usually the main line to leader knot that goes, and if that happens, it leaves the fish trailing a leader plus hook length, and hopefully not a lead if the lead clip does its job, but we do get a lot of leads left on clips with fish as well. So the idea of having no leader really is to mean that if the main line snaps, it's probably going to be at the knot to the leg clip, and all it leaves is the fish with the hook length, which is the safest situation you can have, really.
I just want to pick up on a point that you've just come across there, is that you were saying that, you know, you are picking up trailing fish with safety clips on them where the lead has not discharged, and the primary reason for that is, I take it, they're just pushing the rubbers on too tight, or not licking them or wetting them before they push them on, and it's actually jammed.
Exactly that. I mean, there's a all number of different manufacturers' lead clips on the market. Some have very tight tail rubbers that are quite long, and some have looser tail rubbers that are shorter. Depending on the manufacturer and how hard you push the tail rubber on, or how tightly you push the tail rubber on, depends if the lead's ejected or not. We also get all sorts of experience level of anglers. We get from some of the top anglers that have ever carp fished through to complete beginners that have fished for just a few months in one or two cases. So we have to kind of set the things here based on the worst risk of the least experienced anglers. It's not that they're necessarily trying to do anything wrong, they may just not know, because we all had to learn at some point. But if you have an inexperienced angler with a leg clip that allows you to push the tail rubber on really tight, and some people don't know to wet them as well before they put them on, in some cases it's almost impossible to pull the lead off. I mean, if I can't do it with my hands, a fish can never do it. So yeah, you're right. It's leg clips, if they're used correctly, are very safe. But the trouble is, it's quite easy to not use them correctly.
And then when we booked initially, barbed hooks were allowed. Obviously on the way here, you gave us a heads up and said, look lads, we've changed the rules. We're now using barbless. You were very kind to me and Derek, my fishing partner, that you said, look, you know, because you'd already pre-booked prior to that rule change, we can just pinch the actual barbs down, which we've done. But you've made it a barbless hook rule as well, and a lot of people are on the fence with barbless hooks, but yours is for a very good reason. Again, it's for fish safety. So do you want to sort of add to that?
Yeah, it's a very controversial subject, and it's like politics. You know, everyone's got their views, and it's very hard to convince them left or right of those views. But in a nutshell, barbless hooks, if we do have a fish gets snagged up in the pads and the main line snaps somewhere, whether it's down at the leg clip or with lots of line attached to the fish, either way, if a fish is snagged solid in the pads or is snagged somewhere and it's with a barbless hook, there's a lot more chance that fish gets rid of the hook quite quickly with not too much mouth damage in the process. We've had 6, before we changed that rule, we had 6 fish here since I've been here that were badly tethered on barbed hooks, and would have, in fact, unfortunately we had 1 fatality and 5 I managed to release, which did have some damage, but luckily I got to them before they died, and we released them. They would have died. We also had a big fish that was trailing. It hadn't tethered up, but it was trailing a lot of line and stuff behind it, that was hooked with a barbed hook as well, where the main line had snapped with 20 or 30 yards of line attached to it. That for me was the final. It's just too risky. These fish take years and years to get to these sizes, and you know that they're very valuable as well, and everybody wants to come and catch them.
But not just that, they're your pets, aren't they?
Yeah.
You don't want to see your pets come to harm either, you know?
No, and maybe to sort of say there's pros and cons of barbless. I've carp fished for 35-ish years. I'm really well aware of people's feeling, and I've thought it myself in the past at various times. Barbless hooks can move around a little bit when you're playing fish, and yes, they can create a little bit of mouth damage, maybe more than a barbed hook, maybe. But that's definitely better. A little bit of mouth damage that will heal up quickly is better than having a tethered fish on a barbed hook that's going to have a long, slow death. It's as simple as that.
Now I'm going to move on to your favourite subject, which is bait, because a lot of people coming here will have their ideas of what bait they should be bringing. I know you do your own range here, and it's very well tweaked. So I'll let you. I'll let you. I'll bow to your knowledge on this. Off you go, son.
Well, yeah, bait's been a major interest of mine since I started carp fishing, 35-ish or so years ago. Back in those days, there were no boilies available. We used to buy all our own raw ingredients, and we used to try and design baits that were as perfect as we possibly could for the given situation. Over the years, that's completely changed. Now everybody can just go to a fishing shop or go online and order a bag of boilies. And very, very few people, let's be honest, actually know what's in that bag of boilies. They smell the bag, it smells kind of carpy or nice, and okay, they use it. And if they catch some fish, they feel confident, and that becomes maybe the bait they use a lot. But you don't really know what's in it anymore. I have a firm belief that if you get into bait and you do a lot of research and you really make it a hobby and you understand about bait and you tweak and tune baits for different times of year or different waters, different conditions, it's a major edge that's not exploited by many people anymore. That's a fact of modern carp fishing. I'm also pretty old school in my thinking. A lot of people may not have even heard, but a guy called Fred Wilton back in the 70s had a theory, which I firmly believe is true. If you put the best possible nutritional food source in front of any wild creatures, be they fish or animals or whatever, and you keep applying it for a period of time, the fish or the animal will soon learn that that's the easiest available, best nutritional food source it can get, and therefore it will have a preference to it. And you can almost create an addiction if you put enough in the water over a period of time. So for a number of reasons, I think HMV, that's high nutritional value baits, are much better option for everybody, not just here, other waters as well. Number one, I think we owe these fish some decent food. I mean, we're putting hooks in them, we're reeling them in, and we're taking photos of them out of the water, and it's not nice for the fish, so we should at least give them something decent back, a nutritional food source. I personally feel that way. Secondly, I think that if you apply a food source bait over a period of time in any water in enough quantity that's exceeding everything else that's going in there for a period of time, the fish will get on that bait big time, and they will show a real strong preference for it. The smaller the water, okay, a few bleeps here. Maybe you're just about to get a flyer and land one of those big fish.
Would be nice.
Yeah, I think you have actually.
That's the one out at range.
Okay.
Go on, Simon, you keep talking.
Yeah.
And I'm going to move my bucket so I can see the bottom.
Yeah, I think in a small water, if you have a small enough environment, you can achieve that addiction quite quickly or more easily. We've done exactly that in Badger's Holt, for example. We've fed many kilos, hundreds of kilos of our bait that we've got on here this year into that lake. And most weeks, if it's been a tough week, somebody's using a different bait. If they use some of that bait, or we even give them some of that bait to try, it can turn their week around, and the fish really have a preference for it. Just a few words about the bait we have here and my thinking on successful boilies for carp is I'm a big believer in fish meals. I think fish meals are there's something in food or in nutrition called biological value, and that's the percentage of the protein that the animal can convert for its own use as opposed to just passing through. And if you have a fish meal, it's got a much higher biological value than proteins derived, for example, from vegetable sources or other non-fish or even meat, for example. If you give fish protein that's come from fish, it has a high conversion factor, so the fish can use a lot of it. The other thing we have quite a bit of in the bait we use here is it's about 20 to 25% is milk proteins. the right kind of milk proteins. The milk protein is in there not because of its biological value, but there's a certain level of opiates in milk proteins you're probably aware of, and it's in nature, it's to make in mammals, it makes the baby or the calf, for example, of the cow addicted to wanting to drink more and more milk, which allows them to grow really quickly, which gives them a better chance of survival. Well, the same with carp. I think they get the nutritional value from the fish meals, but they get the addiction part addiction factor from the opiates in the milk proteins. If you bring the two together, then you've got a really, in my opinion, one of the ultimate baits. And we don't flavour them strongly either. I think flavours are way too strong in most baits these days. If you have really strong flavours, a lot of people, it's fashionable right now to wash the baits out. Well, all you're doing is you're allowing a lot of flavour out into the bucket of water to the point where the flavour level is where it probably should have been to start with. I think it's better to just start with a low level flavour in the beginning. And the flavour's not there for attraction, the flavour's there as a label. It's an association between that flavour and good nutritional food, as opposed to just primary attraction. On the other end of the spectrum, we get people coming with pure attractor baits. They've got no nutritional value at all. They're not necessarily bad for the fish, they just pass through the fish. They rely a lot on flavours, a lot of synthetic flavours. You open the bag, it really smells strong of banana or strawberry or whatever. And the fish, if they're given the choice between a high nutritional value bait, HMV bait, and that attractor type bait, in the beginning they'll eat both equally because they both smell good, the fish find them both. But as time goes on, they'll wean slowly and slowly off the attractor bait onto that HMV bait. It happens every time, and that's what we've really achieved here this year. We've put so much in both lakes that the fish see it as a natural food source, even to the point of other good quality HMV baits. And let's face it, there's a lot of good baits on the market right now. They can come to the water, they're very good baits, but they still haven't been baited up as much as the one that we're using. So not to say there's anything wrong with them, but the fish show a preference for the one that they're really used to finding everywhere.
Yeah.
So we've talked about rigs. Obviously we haven't gone down to the fine tuning of the particular rigs. We've talked about bait, but let's talk a little bit more about the lake again itself and the future, because you've owned this lake for 2 years and your plan is a long-term plan. You know, you're putting in place, you know, things that are going to actually improve the fishery and make this the fishery of the next sort of decade anyway. So what are you doing, you know, I mean, I know you're feeding the lake on a regular basis, especially during winter. You're mazing the lake in the spring. What are you doing for the water quality? I know you're talking about silt. And I know from fishing silty lakes that we've used Siltex and other things to try and improve the quality of the lake. Explain to me, are you doing anything sort of like that here, or?
Yeah, okay, good question. So first of all, the silt itself isn't a problem. The silt, I think the silt is fantastic, and we want to retain the silt because it's where all the natural food is. And as I've said, you know, it's not something to be worried about fishing. You just need to get your head around it. But once you have, it's no different than any other form of fishing. We are doing one very important thing every winter. It was never really done intensively before. We started last winter in February, and now we'll do it every year, definitely without fail, every February, and that's to chalk the lake. I'm a big believer in that, and if you look at most of the really successful big fish waters, most of them either do it or at least have done it in the past.
This is inactive chalk, isn't it?
It's inactive aquatic grade chalk. It's not. You need to be careful. There's lots of different grades of chalk, and it's also completely different to liming. You'll hear people talking about liming and chalking and thinking it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. This is inactive chalk. It's calcium carbonate.
Right. And just explain, because a lot of people wouldn't understand, what does that actually do to the lake itself?
So there's a number of benefits from chalking. They're all indirect benefits. I was once told by somebody very wise in fishery management, and if you read the books as well, they say don't think too much about the carp, make the water perfect. Think about creating the best possible water. If you create the best possible water conditions, the carp will thrive, and that's part of what chalking is about, and it's what we're always thinking about here. There's a number of things that are very good for the carp to do with the water. One is pH value. If you have, we're fortunate here, it's not an acidic area, but carp don't like acid conditions, they like mildly alkaline conditions. When we talk about pH, 7 is neutral, anything less than 7 is acidic, anything more than 7 is alkaline. A pH of say 7.5 to 8.5, around about 7.8 to 8 is really perfect. Chalk is an alkaline material. When you add chalk to water, depending on what the pH was already, how much you add, and a number of other factors, you can slightly change the pH. We here in Surier, right at this moment in time, our pH is 7.9. It's as perfect as we can get it, and part of that is to do with the chalking that we did last year. You get an effect from the chalk though, and it does reduce over a period of time, and you need to keep doing it every year. Some people even twice a year in the beginning, but ours is quite close to perfect to begin with, so once a year I think is enough. So number one is pH. The second thing it does is it increases the availability, well, it increases the activity of bacteria in the top layers of the silt, and it increases the depth that the bacteria are active. It does it by basically a chemical process that increases the amount of oxygen in the silt. Normally oxygen is only present in the very top layers of the silt, and if you siltex or chalkolate, you increase the depth that the oxygen is available. Therefore you increase the activity level of the bacteria, and in a nutshell you essentially mean that the bacteria can decay more leaves and more organic matter that the silt is organic. Most of the silt is organic matter that's decomposing. If it's going in faster than the bacteria can decompose it every year, your lake is slowly silting up. If the bacteria can decompose it quicker than it's going in, your silt level is going to go down. The reason some people apply Siltex is to try and increase the decay rate to gain back water, i.e. get rid of silt. That would be nice in some areas here. We do have some very shallow areas where a few inches more depth would always help, but it isn't our primary reason. But we do, as you mentioned, we want to be here long term, we want to run the fishery long term, and we want to make sure that our leaf loading and organic loading that goes in every autumn, when all the stuff falls in the water like it is at the moment, there's a healthy layer of bacteria in the silt that's going to decompose it. So that's another benefit. And the third benefit is that you, by putting calcium carbonate or chalk in the water, you're increasing the availability of calcium to the natural food cycle that's going on in the water. And tons of insect life, particularly things like snails and anything with a skeleton or a shell, just like we need calcium for our bones and teeth, these small creatures also need calcium for growing. So you tend to get explosions of natural food that you much more than you had before, and they become bigger or faster growing, so you can have more cycles in a year, or larger snails or larger insects. By promoting the growth of a lot of natural food, or the availability of a lot of natural food, the carp benefit. You're not really feeding the carp, but you're creating a lot more food for the carp. And in the summer, it's quite unbelievable here just how much natural food there is. You see the fly hatches. It looks like it's raining. There's so many flies coming off the water. So it's it seems to be working. We only did it for the first time. We've ordered again. We are using Siltex, which is the best one you can get as far as I'm aware. We've ordered it again for this coming winter, and we'll be doing it again in February.
And what other kind of fish are in this lake? I mean, I know it's predominantly carp, but I mean, you do have other fish in here, don't you?
Yeah, we have predominantly carp. We have a lot of pike, a lot of perch, some bass, and some other predatory fish. We also have roach. The roach are quite successful at spawning every year. If you didn't manage it, numbers could get out of hand. The reason we have a lot of predators, and we allow the predators to continue to breed and be quite present in the lake, is that they control for us the roach population. If we didn't have them in here, it would explode out of control very quickly, I think. We also have some catfish, not that many. We don't want too many because they can take over the water, but we have a number of big catfish to about 80 pounds £85, I think was the biggest so far since we've been here. There's rumours of one much bigger one, well over £100, but I don't know, to be honest.
Until it's on the bank.
Until it's on the bank, we have a very small population of other silverfish, for example some rudd. Somebody's actually reported they've seen a chub or two in here as well. I don't know if that's right or not. I haven't, but yeah, and that's about it. I mean, it's a good question. Important to any fishery owner is the total biomass. You've got a biomass which is all the fish in the lake, and you've got a percentage of it that's carp, and the smaller the percentage of carp, or the higher the percentage of everything else, the less the food availability to the carp, and that's why we want to control all those other species. If you don't control them, everything else breeds quite successfully. You end up with more and more non-carp species consuming oxygen, eating food, and taking the other benefits out of the water, and it's less and less availability for the carp. That's why we you asked about the future. We also did a netting last winter. We removed a lot of roach, about 3 tons of roach, and periodically we'll be doing nettings as well in the winter. Not this winter, every probably 3 years or something like that, to remove unwanted species.
And with the carp themselves, are they spawning successfully in here?
Generally, they don't. Well, let's say they do spawn successfully in a lot of waters, but they self-predate a lot on their own spawn and their own fry, and so does everything else. I mentioned all the predators. We've got pike and perch and everything queuing up to eat any fry that are successful. So generally speaking, most years I think they're quite unsuccessful, although maybe a very small number of fish do get through. Having said that, about 4 years or maybe 5 years ago, something around that time, there was a successful spawning, and there was, I don't know how many fish, maybe 50 or something have come through from that. But we have a lot of small mirrors in here, around sort of 18 to 25 pounds. They're humpy back, French Royal looking fish. They're humpy back, deep fish, round. They're exactly the same shape as some of the biggest fish in the lake, and they're a perfect shape for becoming really big fish. So I know nobody comes all the way down here to try and catch that size fish, but having said that, it's the future of the lake. It's very important to have those fish. So in answer to the question, they don't normally spawn successfully, but maybe the odd year there are a few come through, and if that is maintained, that's perfect for the future, because we're self-sufficient then. We don't have to introduce stock, which is always a little bit risky.
And poisson chat, crayfish, you get a couple in here, not too many, or?
Yeah, we have, well, in Badger's Holt there's no poison chat at all, but there are crayfish present. They're active in the summer, but at this time of year usually completely inactive, and they're not really a problem. You can wrap baits, and nobody's had an issue with them. There's a solution to the problem, if you like. They're a good sign because they show your water quality is very good as well, and the carp do eat them as well. We get bits of crunched up crayfish being excreted by the carp, sometimes in the slings and stuff like that. In Syria we have also crayfish, but we do have poison chat. They're on the river system. They're almost everywhere in France, unavoidable. They're not on Badgers because it's not on a primary river system. It's the first lake on a small stream system that then flows into Syria. The chat are, they also have to be managed. If you leave them, they will breed and get out of control to the point where you can't keep a boilie in the water, which is very bad, obviously, for fishing and for the carp in terms of availability of food. Oh.
pins. Looks a decent fish. Oh, she is a decent fish. Mirror.
Nice. Good now.
Come on, you must have had enough. I have.
This goes to show, doesn't it? Because it looks almost no shows or anything down
No.
that end.
Do you want to drop the net for me? She's coming this way.
That's a better one for you.
What size?
It's definitely a 40. If not, a 50. It's a good 40 in it. It's a 50. 52.12 or thereabouts. It's not an often caught fish. I think that was 47 or 48 last. I'll have to go and check it.
Can we get that sling out of the way?
Yes?
Yeah,
Not a knee shot. Alright, ready, 1, 2, 3. Be careful, the water's really shallow.
Yeah.
I'll give it a smile. UPB 212.
Good?
Got plenty of chickens here.
Yeah?
I'll send you them as well.
What a beast. Look at the back of it. Camera on me. Get in.
Look at that. Lovely, eh?
My God. Did I just catch that?
You'll get a line bite any minute.
She is a beast, isn't she? Oh my God. Yes. Sorry about the interruption, guys, but one of the rods was tore off. We were actually getting a little bit of an inquiry on my left-hand rod on the pod here. Well, my other rod fished over at the pads has just, well, I wouldn't say it ripped off, but the bobbin hit the top and it was pulling tight. So we had to cut the interview a little bit shorter than we wanted. But I'm not regretting it because it was a 52.12, wasn't it?
52.12 Miller.
And that's my new PB.
Congratulations.
So, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Simon. And
Do an interview more often.
I mean, great scrap as well. It's really hard to tell the weights of fish when you've got them actually on the line because all of them fight. I mean, even the 17 pounder, which is the smallest I've had, puts such a strong account of itself that you're actually thinking, oh, this is a much bigger fish, and it's not. But we're going to wrap up the interview now with, a lot of people do get sort of very confused about silt fishing. They arrive at a lake, they're so used to, feeling the donk, looking for the hard patch. When you're fishing shallow waters, the average depth of this lake is what?
It's about 3.5 feet, maybe
Right.
4 feet.
Right, so you're not going to be feeling leads down, because the minute it hits, but at the time you start spooling, with your finger, it's down on the deck anyway. And also you're not going to get the donk, are you? Because it's silt.
No, absolutely.
So, have you any tips to fishing in silt, especially rigs? Now, I mean, when I fish in my lakes and they're full of silt as well, I tend to use a helicopter style rig, but I fish it in a chod manner. So that basically I set a top bead so that my hook link can run up, and I obviously use a nugget of foam so that when it settles down, the lead has penetrated as deep as it's going to go into the silt. The actual hook link will fall down slowly on top of the actual silt itself. Now, because of the rules that are in place here, I didn't really want to be fishing a naked style chod rig. I know you could, and I know there are safe setups, but I wasn't too comfortable. So it was more sort of lead clips, isn't it? And I know you've covered lead clips and making sure you use the right ones. You tend to promote the MCF ones because they dump lead every single time. There's no grey area with them, isn't there?
They
They're really,
cannot be set up wrong.
which is
perfect.
the idiot proof. But what are your best tips? Because as I say, people are going to hit a swim and they're just going to go, I've got 2-3 acres of water in front of me that is devoid of features. It's pretty much all the one level. It's just silt. Where do I go from here?
Well, yeah, that's also a really good question, and we get asked week in, week out by people that haven't been here before when they arrive, what do I do, and I'm really scared about silt. First thing to say, don't be scared about silt. The fish absolutely love it. The reason they're so big is the silt. It's full of food. Don't be shy about it. A lot of people make the mistake, and it's because it's been written about in all the magazines and DVDs and stuff for years, of all this stuff about prodding and trying to find hard, gravelly spots. Well, this is not a gravel pit, and there's very, very few hard areas. There are a few, but you could spend a day in some of the swims trying to find one tiny hard area. People have done it. In the process, you spook the whole swim, sometimes for days ahead. And usually the hard areas, when you finally locate one, do not produce any fish whatsoever. It's like the Sahara Desert to the fish. It's barren. There's nothing on it whatsoever. If they find some bait on it, it's too obvious and conspicuous in a lot of cases. So the best way to find the spots to fish in this lake is use your eyes. Fish finders don't work because it's too shallow, and you have to go right over the top of a fish to see it. The cone of the fish finder under the water is too narrow unless you're in quite a deep water. So forget fish finders, forget going out in a boat and prodding. My recommendation is, when you arrive on a Saturday, don't commit yourself to loads of bait in an area on the Saturday. Fish singles or something on the Saturday. Wait till Saturday evening and then Sunday morning, and set your alarm before it gets light in the morning. Be out of your bivvy, make a cup of tea or coffee or whatever, and sit there and watch the water like a hawk. The fish will show you where they're feeding. The fish will show you the spots. The depth is not that important. The type of bottom makeup is not important. It's just where the fish are showing, and they show you everything you need to see. So first of all, don't look for hard spots. Not necessary. When you do see the fish, my guess is they'll always be feeding over silt. Now you have to remember, these fish have been in the lake for many years. They've grown up as silt feeding fish. That's all they know. They bury their heads in the silt. Sometimes when you catch fish, their heads can be still kind of covered in silt, and the gills can have a lot of silt in them. If you look inside the gills, sometimes it's full of mud and stuff. You can actually see how they've been feeding. Now, because the fish feed right in the silt, you shouldn't be scared about your rig and your bait being in the silt. I know it takes a lot of getting your head round if you've been used to fishing hard, gravelly, sandy areas on gravel pits, but if you think about it, for example, some people, they use a pop-up, maybe 3 or 4 inches high pop-ups over the top of the silt, and the fish is feeding maybe 6 or 8 inches down into the silt. That puts your rig, your hook bait, so far above the fish's head or mouth that they often miss it. So there's no need to have pop-ups. There's no need to even particularly balance baits, because the other thing in silt is they cause complete chaos when they're feeding. Everything's going everywhere. They're fanning silt in all directions. If you could watch them, it's kind of they dig everything up. And if you have really, really critically balanced baits, they tend to go wafting off really unnaturally compared to the free baits. My personal favourite way of fishing it is a shortish hook length, which is the opposite of what a lot of people think in silk.
How short are we talking now?
About 6 inches, 5-6 inches, something like that. If you're dropping from a bait boat or a rowing boat, 5 or 6 inches, because the lead doesn't plug as much. If you're casting, maybe increase it by 2 inches or so. So that means about 7 inches, something like that.
And what sort of weight lead would you use?
If I'm dropping from a bait boat or a rowing boat and it's not that windy, so there's not too much undertow and so on, and there's no problem with your lines bowing out, I use 2 ounce flat pairs leads. If you're going to be casting, obviously the range is involved on Syriere. You can't always reach the spots with 2 ounce, so then I would up it to 3 ounce, and you might have to go to a distance style lead as opposed to a flat pair. But you can reach, with the right tackle, you can reach most spots in most swims with a 3 ounce torpedo style, distance style lead, and about a 7 inch hook length. Regarding the rig itself, I would personally recommend, it's a big favourite of mine, is a double bottom bait, or possibly a snowman, so one bottom bait and a small pop-up. Not so it's really, really balanced though, because again, the way they feed in the silt, they tend to fan everything out, and the really balanced baits just go flying off in all directions. And I think that sometimes they just don't take them. It's not even that they spook them, they just can't get them in their mouths. A double bottom bait stays where it is, and let the fish find it. It will find it. It'll dig around, even if it gets buried in amongst others. They spend their whole life digging stuff up, and if you've got a spread of bait, they know the bait's there. They'll just find it and they eat it, and it's really simple fishing. Back to the lead, the idea of lead clips. Yeah, if you use an MCF lead clip, you do not need to drop the lead on every take. The MCFs often do drop the leads, but you
Pretty
don't
much,
have to. Yeah. The rule on the lake is to drop the lead if you get the lead snagged. So people have accused us of saying, why do I have to lose the lead on every take? That's not what we're trying to aim at.
No.
If you choose to fish in a way that you don't lose the lead unless it gets snagged, that's absolutely fine, no problem. And one other point with the lead setups, we do get people used to fishing gravel pits, never fish silt, and they fish heavy inline leads. And that's not a really very good method in the soft silt. The reason is an inline lead is heavier at its nose end, where the hook length is coming out from the lead. It tends to nose dive into the silt an inch or 2 or 3, depending on if you've cast or dropped it from a bait boat, and it's dragging the hook length in with it. So that's not a very effective way of fishing. And if you fish it with, some people have fished inline leads with a stiff, like a fluorocarbon or something hook length, that can then stick up from the bottom, kind of like a traffic light saying here is the danger spot. So I wouldn't recommend stiff hook lengths or inline leads when you're fishing in silt.
Just out of interest, what hook length material would you recommend for people making their rigs if they're coming to Syriere or a water that's similar to this? What's your favourite? And I'll tell you why. There's the reason why I've asked you this, because I suppose over the last few years we've all become real big fans of these coated braids. They're such an easy product to use, and they seem to catch so many fish. But fishing in France in August, I was on a very shallow lake, a lot shallower than this, believe it or not. But the guy who runs the place was, explaining to me that a lot of people use use the coated braid, and it's the wrong way to go. He prefers using actual braid itself. And his logic was that because it's so shallow and the fish are so big, the way they come in to feed isn't like a standard lake where they actually tilt up a lot. So they're actually sucking from a further distance. So if you've got, say, the actual hook bait that's been held up as you cast or drop from a boat with a piece of nugget or foam, and then it's sort of softly drops down. It's not kicking away from the lead, it'll actually land near enough on top of the lead. And that gives the fish that bit of play so that when it sucks, it'll actually shoot back into the mouth. I mean, do you follow any of that logic, or is it something that you really don't concern yourself too heavily with?
Well, I did go through a phase in my own fishing of using Korda Supernatural, which is a very, very soft, thin braid, and it's extremely supple. The only problem, I can understand the logic in the thinking, and it does make the bait behave really naturally, but you tend to get some problems. If you're casting, it can tangle really easily,
Yeah.
no matter what happens, and especially casting really long range, you tend to be punching it hard, and that gives you more risks of tangles because the hook length's going right up against the main line most of the flight, if you like, out into during the cast. For that reason, I prefer, if I'm casting, I prefer to use a stiffer element in the hook length material. The other slight problem is with, again, it's just a personal opinion, but with the very soft braids, they're not very self-resetting, and if you get, for example, crayfish or poison chat or something playing with the bait, they can tie it up in knots, and you can end up coming in with a rig that's been, basically
Mangled.
mangled, yeah, for want of a better word, and you're not fishing anymore at that point.
Yeah.
So I must admit, I go a little bit with the flow, and I do quite like coated braids, because it's very easy to achieve a presentation where you've got about 90% of the hook length with some stiffness, which keeps it from being tangled up by small fish or whatever, and gives you a high degree of, like, say, anti-tangle capability in the rig. But I do really like stripping the last, if I'm using a hook length of, say, 5 or 6 inches, I strip about a centimetre and a half of braid at the hook end, and I don't actually strip it, I just break the coating at the other end, so you've got like a hinge at one end and a little bit of supple at the other. And I like that because the hook turns so much easier. I know everyone talks about pulling it across your palm and does it turn? Well, I still do that, and I think it's a valid, it's not exactly how it behaves in the carp's mouth, but if it doesn't turn on my palm and hook in, then I'm not very confident in it personally. And I've watched the Syrier fish feeding a lot from boats during the winter. We were talking earlier about feeding. We do feed them a lot, and in the winter the water's very clear. You can see everything. When they start feeding, they quickly colour the water up, but if you're lucky enough to be there before they've really coloured it up, you do see them regularly, and they are absolutely head down, tail up. I mean, they're vertical almost when they're feeding, and they're pushing. They use the force of their tails. They're almost swimming into the bottom, pushing themselves into the bottom. So in Syria, at least, I think they do still go, head down, tail up when they're feeding. And that's another reason, by the way, why I think the short hook lengths are better, because they're not moving. If they feed on hard bottoms, on boilies that are spread about, they tend to go down, pick up one, come up, go and pick up the next one. In silt, they tend to graze in an area with
cows do.
Head down, tail up, and they can stay like that for quite a long time until they get probably, I think they clog up their gill rakers eventually with mud and silt, and that's when they sometimes head and shoulder to clear it, or they just come away from the feeding area for a second, loop around, swim around, and start again slightly in a different area. But a short hook length tends to hook them, even if they're not moving much, from bait to bait quicker, and you get hook holds in the bottom lip. Long hook lengths, you get hook holds in the side, and I tend to get more hook pulls as well with long hook lengths.
So I think that's kind of the end of the interview now. For now, I want to thank Simon for taking some time out, for sitting down and chatting with us. Just one thing I will say to you is a lot of fishery managers tend to over push their fisheries. You can't over push a fishery like this because it has in it what it claims to have. What I'm talking about is some fishery managers can be overzealous with information and point you sometimes in the wrong direction. When I was coming down to Serrières, one of the big things for me was, I try to pump anyone I know who's been here for info so that I can be prepared. And I found, in the nicest possible way, that Simon is one of the most evasive carp fishery managers I've ever met in my life, and that is because he doesn't want to fill your head with bull. I was asking him about rigs, and his attitude was very simple. Wait till you get here. Tie up your rigs when you arrive, because every swim is different, every day is different, the fish will be behaving differently, and bait-wise it was the same. He sort of would guide you slightly, and when we arrived he was very much, look, it's not been fishing very well, this is what I would suggest you do. But the big thing was, he said, just stand and watch the water, the fish will tell you where they are. and in fairness they have done. So I want to thank Simon for taking the time out to sit here and talk to us. Word to the wise though, if you are thinking of coming to Serrières and you decide to take the food package, most of us on the way down here were thinking to ourselves, do you know what, we'll only get a bit of breakfast in the morning, a bit of tea in the evening, we won't get a lunch, so you know, we might lose a bit of weight on this trip. Not a chance. Karina has absolutely knocked it out of the park with the cooking, and I reckon already we're only midway through of the week. It's Wednesday, and to be honest with you, I think we've already put up about half a stone on what we've eaten. It's stunning food. So it's been a real interesting trip so far. I have to say I'm very happy with my results. That was fish number 6 I've had so far, 52.12, and I wouldn't mind. We've got Big Fish Thursday coming tomorrow, which, you know, I don't know how I'm going to top it. It's nice to say that I would, but I don't know how I could. But I want to thank, as I said, Simon, for being such a good sport. He's a great host, very gracious man, and it's been really interesting listening to the wealth of knowledge that he so obviously oozes about his passion. And you can see his passion. The minute you talk to him, he's a very passionate man about this place, and I don't blame him. It is absolutely stunning. So again, Simon, thank you very much for having us. It's been a great trip so far, and no doubt we'll see Simon later on in the week, just before we leave, on the video.
Thanks, Joey.
No problem.
Love them or hate them, bait boats are here to stay and can offer an angler a real advantage if used correctly. Fishing abroad often brings challenges where bait boats are not a luxury but a necessity, and it was this in mind I took to the web to research what was the best boat on the market. I've already owned numerous Angling Technic boats and have found them reliable and good for customer service, but the consensus on the web was that the Carp Lounge RT4 boat was head and shoulders above the rest. One look at their website and I was suitably impressed. The first thing I will say about the boats is that they are fully customizable at purchase, from extended stronger range handsets to different internal motors that are designed to handle different jobs. For example, you can order an ultra quiet motor if you're fishing small intimate waters, or say the brushless HPD motor if you're planning to fish more continental waters or rivers. The boats can also be fitted with built-in echo sounders and GPS systems. The RT4 is powered by 2 lithium-ion batteries. The main battery runs the boat, but if it runs low during a drop, you can move power to the back battery or the backup battery via the handset. The batteries are 4-cell Samsung lithium ions and are charged via the road balance charger that is supplied with the boat. The batteries are rated to 14.8 volts but will charge over 16 volts.
Due to the lithium-ion battery's makeup, they must never be discharged below 12.5 volts, as this will damage the cells, rendering the batteries useless. The boat has a built-in digital voltage meter and has a backup, so as soon as the battery is drained sufficiently, the boat lights start to flash. At this point, you are able to move from your main battery to the backup battery via your handset and carry on the baiting up. Once back on shore, you're able to exchange your dying battery for a fresh one. It's a quick and easy way and a great workaround to manage your batteries.
Now this boat isn't just a boat, this boat has so many features I don't know where to begin. The great thing about when you buy this boat is when you're on the website, which is carplounge.de, you can actually configure your purchase so it can be just the boat on its own, or you can have add-ons. Now when I bought this, what I wanted to have done was I wanted an echo sounder fitted, and I went for the echo sounder that I got was the one with GPS as well. Now the GPS allows me to drive the boat out to a spot within the lake that I want to drop my bait, hit a quick target, so I'm allowed to hit the button and it will mark that exact spot. And every time I want to go back to that spot, I can go into my menu on my echo sounder and it will allow me drop my bait back within 1 meter, because let's face it, GPS is never that accurate, but within 1 meter of that last drop, or the drop that I set the marker on, which is a very, very nifty feature, especially at night. Also, with the actual GPS system that's built in, it allows me know which direction the boat is moving, because at night, you know yourself, even with lights, most boats can tend to get a little bit lost, and it can take you a little time to, especially at distance, to orientate where you're driving. With this particular model, because I've got the GPS built in, when the nose is facing me, the arrow is facing me on my actual set of my echo sounder, so I know exactly which way my boat is pointing at any given time, and the range is phenomenal. Now the actual boat can handle about 4 kilo of bait, and the hoppers 2 kilo each side. Now I've never been a big fan of using that kind of a bait in a bait boat, but it does mean that you can drive at speed onto your point, hit the doors as you go, and it will trail the bait out over a distance. Usually the boat doesn't have an aerial, it's an aerial-less boat, but this particular aerial is fitted for the GPS system and the echo sounder. The echo sounder is very accurate, as is the GPS. And I'll tell you one thing I've noticed, most echo sounders on boats don't like shallow ground, and as soon as they get under, sort of under a meter, they start packing up. Not so with this. I've been in 0.3 of a meter, and it's handled it really, really well. It's got full navigation lights. It's got the 2 main LED lights here, and also if you want, you can add 26 LEDs, or I think it's 26 or 24 LEDs extra by your handset. So if it is dark and you need to put a bit of illumination on a spot, especially if you're going up close to a tree line, these will actually help you, and you can then turn them off via the handset as well. It has 2 lights on either side. You've got this side and obviously the reverse side here. On the reverse side, I think it's red, or it's red on one side and green on the other, so you know basically which side your boat is facing. And on the back, it has a voltage meter here to allow you to know exactly how your batteries are doing. And when you move over to your backup battery, a big huge white LED on either side of your screen here light up. So even at distance, and I'm talking at 140 yards out, you can actually see that, so you know that your backup battery is kicked in. One of the interesting features of this particular boat, it has 2 solenoid droppers here. So what you can do is you can either hook up your hook baits onto these and drop them independently to your hoppers. So if you're getting out to a spot and you want to bait a particular spot but have your hook baits off the spot, which a lot of big fish anglers do, you're able to drop your hook baits independently of your actual hoppers. So that's a really sexy little feature. Now if you're into using back leads or flying back leads, you can actually put on some flying back leads into these and drop them at varied spots on the way out. Again, a nice little feature. And if you're a pike angler, you know, if you're using sunken paternosters or any sort of paternoster style fishing, these little things are going to be a godsend. Really strong handle here that will allow you lift it in and out of the water. The actual material that it's made of is indestructible. Apparently you can stand on this and it won't break. Not going to be trying that anytime soon. Brushless motors. The motors are actually fitted on the underneath. That's the actual echo sounder there, which is all fitted in, built in factory. But the actual motors here are this very, very quiet and very silent motor that gives it a much faster propulsion than, I mean, I've had microcats for a number of years, and the microcats were great, but I find this is a much quicker turning, faster boat, especially if you've moved over to the Microcat HT, which I find exceptionally slow to maneuver around a lake. You can buy two different handsets. It comes with the standard handset, or you can buy the Futaba handset. And the Futaba handset allows you to have greater range on your boat. But the great thing, as I said, about the actual website, when you actually do buy one of these boats, the actual website itself will give you a full run through of all the things that you can buy with it, all the extras. So you can actually build the custom boat to your own design, all the extras that you want on it, inside and out. But all in all, a cracking piece of kit. Not cheap, but certainly one of the better boats on the market by a country mile.
Now, with any technology that's new, there'll always be the pluses and the minuses. So I suppose if I'm to be truthful about the boat, I have to say, the plus point is it's absolutely outstanding. The features and the actual way it's been designed and finished is superb. There is nothing on the market to touch it, and I can verify that, having looked extensively. But what I will say is there is, we have to be honest and come up with a negative. And the only negative that I could possibly come up with are the batteries. Now, the batteries themselves, as I've said already, are lithium-ion batteries. And the reason why lithium-ion drew me in the beginning was because we've used lithium-ion for a number of years now, whether it be through laptops or cell phones, and we know that lithium-ion batteries are reliable, they give a great source of output, and they are consistent with their power. Because of the setup of them, it makes them very expensive. The retail price of per battery is around €70 from Carp Lounge. Now, the great thing about the actual lithium-ion battery is they're small and they don't weigh too heavy, whereas the lead batteries that we're used to using in other boats are big, cumbersome and very heavy. But they are also inexpensive, which means you can carry more of them if you so wish. Charging up a lead acid battery on the bank is quite a simple affair, because if you have sunshine and you have a solar power, you can just hook the batteries up and charge them up during the daylight hours, and off you go. Your batteries will charge up quite rapidly and quickly. The lithium-ion batteries, we can't do that. We actually have to have an AC output source, so we have to have mains power on site, or we have to bring another battery that will charge those batteries. Now, the other battery I tend to bring when I'm going for a long session is a marine style battery. It's like a car battery, but slightly a stronger output and a more level output than a car battery. And I tend to bring one of those for just charging up all my units and portable devices in the bivvy while I'm there for a long stay. With the Robe Charger, it does come with crocodile clips that allows you to connect the Robe Charger directly to one of these large car batteries or marine batteries, and then charge your small lithium-ion batteries from your Robe Charger on the bank, which, let's face it, is quite a neat compromise. The negative is you have to lug a big, huge battery around with you. Now, what I will say is, two batteries come with a boat as standard. So you have the main battery and the backup battery, and it's always then good to maybe purchase a third one just to have as an extra. Once you have the extra, you can then chop and change charging the battery as it runs down, and you will run through a good few days before you run into any trouble. If you're only going for a short weekend session, two batteries will suffice you plenty for that particular trip, unless you are getting some serious action where your rods are never out of the water. But as I said, it is the only negative I can come up to, that Being lithium ion, they are a little bit more, you have to take a little bit more care of them. Charging is a little bit more awkward. You can't just do it on the fly with a solar charger. Outside of that, if that's the worst negative I can come up with, I think Carp Lounge have done a cracking sterling job in creating what is one of the most effective bait boat systems on the market. The other quick point is price. Now, initially, when you look at the pricing points of the Carp Lounge products, you think they're quite expensive, but when you take into account that the euro is exceptionally weak and has been for about nearly a year and a half, sterling is exceptionally strong, it actually means that buying what is the most expensive boat on the market is actually cheaper than buying one of the lesser expensive boats, because we are paying through euro. If I was to say go to the UK to buy an Angling Technics boat, and I'm in Ireland using euro currency, the Angling Technics boat, while a cheaper boat technically, would actually work out more expensive than the Carp Lounge. So at the moment, it's incredible value for anybody buying outside of the UK. And in fact, if you're from within the UK buying one of these boats, changing your sterling up to euro to buy it will mean that you'll actually get an even better deal than people who are just buying in euro. So all in all, it's a win-win for Carp Lounge. As I've said already, I'm a fan. This machine has put fish on the bank that I would not have caught in any other circumstance this week, and it's also given me my personal best. So how could I not love the product?
This one went 34 on the nose, taken from a spot where I watched them jumping and fizzing and bubbling this morning. When I put the boat over them, a couple of them scattered, and I thought I'd done my chances, but this prattled off just a few minutes ago. And yeah, let's get her back. Derek had flogged the island swim all week to no avail, and Marcus, who was one swim up in Tim and Mary's, was equally struggling. It was obvious the carp was stacked up my end of the lake, and after a couple of days of gentle persuasion, Derek joined me in the wood swim on the Thursday morning and was soon off the mark with a couple of fish. People who don't fish think we are stone mad to do what we do. And in truth, they're probably right. But the world would be a boring place without a sprinkling of madness. Madness or not, there is nothing quite like what we do, and I wouldn't trade that madness for normality, ever.
Madness, they call it madness. Madness, madness, they call it madness. It's plain to see that is what they mean to me. Madness.
How about you, you crazy Dutch bastard?
Madness, madness, they call it madness. Madness, madness, they call it madness. I'm about to explain it, and then someone is losing their breath. Hey, madness, madness, I call it madness. Propaganda ministers, I've got a heaven Jew. I'm gonna walk all over you. Cause madness, madness, they call it madness. Well, if this is madness,